The Golden Bachelorette. Signs Joan Vassos and Chock Chapple have given up trying to blend their families. January 30, 2025. Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. After getting engaged on The Golden Bachelorette Season 1, Joan Vassos and Chock Chapple were determined to bring their families together, but that may not be working out. Joan, who recently celebrated her 62nd birthday, was married to Joan Vassos for 32 years until he died in 2021. They had 4 children together, who are all adults now. 60-year-old Chock is a divorcee with 2 children of his own. All 6 of their children are adults now and remain close to their parents. After getting engaged at the end of The Golden Bachelorette Season 1, Joan and Chock were focused on blending their families, but it hasn't gone as smoothly as they'd hoped. Read on for signs that Joan and Chock have given up on trying to bring their families together. Joan and Chock's family drama explained. Since getting engaged on The Golden Bachelorette Season 1, Joan and Chock immediately turned their focus to blending their families, but it hadn't gone as planned. In December, Joan and Chock posted an Instagram clip discussing bringing their families together, which Joan confesses has been a little harder right now. The couple didn't expand on the details, but it's clear that Joan and Chock have family drama to work through. Joan's children had serious concerns. Joan and Chock met each other's children during The Golden Bachelorette Season 1. Joan met Chock's 2 children, Taylor and Tyler Chapple, during hometown visits. Chock met several of Joan's children when they traveled to Bora Bora during the series finale. Joan's children told Chock that they were concerned that he tried to replace their late father, but he assured them that he had no intention of doing so. His response seemed to mollify them, but it's unclear if their concerns have persisted. Joan had 2 separate birthday events. Joan and Chock have been together a lot since leaving The Golden Bachelorette, but he was recently absent from an important event. Joan posted Instagram photos and footage from her birthday celebration, and Chock was conspicuously missing from the event. Several of her children and grandchildren gathered around her as Joan celebrated her 62nd trip around the sun. The Golden Bachelorette had a second birthday event. Joan and Chock posted Instagram photos from their trip to New York where they celebrated Joan's birthday with friends. It could be a bad sign that Chock didn't attend Joan's family event, while her family didn't appear at her event with Chock. It could be a coincidence, but it could also mean Joan and Chock have given up on bringing their families together. To ease some of Joan's children's anxieties, but it remained uncertain whether those concerns had truly disappeared. The reality of blending 2 families, especially when one of them is still grieving the loss of a parent, is far more complex than what could be resolved in a brief conversation. Chapter 3. Trouble in Paradise. As the months passed after the Golden Bachelorette finale, Joan and Chock continued their relationship with high hopes. Yet, behind the smiles in social media posts, there were signs that things were not as smooth as they appeared. In December, Joan and Chock posted a video on Instagram where they discussed the challenges they were facing while trying to bring their families together. Joan admitted that blending their families had proven a little harder right now than they had anticipated. The couple did not provide specific details, but the underlying tension was palpable. It was clear that, despite their best efforts, the road to unity was filled with bumps. Joan's children, who had already expressed their concerns about Chock's role in their lives, seemed to remain cautious. While they had met Chock with an open mind during the show, the reality of their mother's engagement to another man after the loss of their father was still a difficult pill to swallow. Family gatherings were no longer the same, and the easy camaraderie that had once existed seemed strained. Joan's desire to keep the peace and make everyone feel comfortable was being tested more than she had expected. For Chock, the situation was equally challenging. He wanted to be a supportive partner to Joan, but he also felt the weight of his own children's feelings about the relationship. His children, though not as vocal as Joan's, also struggled with the idea of their father finding love again. Blending their lives with Joan's family was not going to happen overnight, and Chock knew this. But despite his best intentions, the gap between both families was widening, not closing. Chapter 4: The Birthday Dilemma. A particularly telling moment came when Joan celebrated her 62nd birthday. She posted several photos on Instagram from her celebration, and while the event was filled with love and laughter, one notable absence stood out: Chock. Joan's children and grandchildren were all there, gathered around her in joy, but Chock was nowhere to be seen. This was particularly puzzling for fans of the Golden Bachelorette, who had followed Joan and Chock's journey since the show aired. Joan had celebrated her special day with her family, but Chock had not been there. The absence raised questions. Was there trouble in paradise? Why wasn't Chock with Joan on such an important occasion? Chock later posted photos from a second birthday celebration in New York, where he and Joan had traveled together to mark her special day. This second event, though lovely, only added to the confusion. Joan's family had not attended the New York celebration, and Chock's family did not appear to be part of the event either. It seemed that Joan's birthday had become a tale of two separate worlds, one with her family and one with her fiancé. It wasn't just the birthday celebration that caused concern. Joan and Chock's attempts to bring their families together seemed to have stalled. Family gatherings were becoming more fractured, and the connection that Joan had hoped to foster between her children and Chock's children was slipping away. They were living in separate orbits, no longer trying to merge their worlds, but instead retreating to their respective comfort zones. Chapter 5: The Reality of Blending Families. Blending families, especially after the death of a loved one or a divorce, is a deeply complex process. It's not just about sharing holidays or sitting down to dinner together. It's about accepting new dynamics, adjusting expectations, and finding ways to honor the past while embracing the future. Joan and Chock's situation was no different, and their challenges were far more complicated than they may have initially realized. Joan's children had lost their father, and while they respected Chock as a person, they weren't ready to accept him as a new father figure. Chock, on the other hand, was aware that his role was never to replace John, but rather to offer his love and companionship to Joan. However, that didn't mean it was easy for his children to embrace the changes either. They had their own memories of their mother's divorce, and the prospect of seeing their father move on was something they struggled to accept. As the months passed, Joan and Chock found themselves faced with a difficult decision. Should they continue to push for their families to blend, or should they accept that it might never fully happen? The tension between their love for one another and the reality of their children's emotional needs was growing harder to ignore. Chapter 6: Letting Go of Perfection. In a heartfelt conversation shared on social media, Joan and Chock acknowledged the reality that blending families might not happen in the way they had imagined. "We've realized that love isn't always about perfection," Joan wrote in a caption. "It's about accepting each other for who we are and finding a way to make it work, even when things don't go as planned." For Joan, this realization was bittersweet. She had hoped for a harmonious family dynamic, where everyone would come together in celebration of her new chapter with Chock. But the reality was more complicated. For Chock, it was a painful acceptance that his relationship with Joan would not automatically mean a close bond with her children, and that the process of blending their families would take much longer than expected. But despite the challenges, Joan and Chock remained committed to each other. They weren't giving up on their love, but they were learning to let go of their expectations of perfection. They understood that their families might never be one big happy unit, and that was okay. Epilogue: A New Beginning. Joan and Chock's journey was far from over. While blending their families might never happen in the way they once envisioned, their love for each other remained strong. They were learning to navigate the complexities of their relationship with patience, understanding, and grace. And while their families might not be fully united, Joan and Chock knew that they could create a future together, one step at a time, without the pressure to force a perfect ending.